This is mainly for my Path Changers family and those in my own organization, whom I've promised to record the Think and Grow Rich calls for the last couple of days, and my phone has not been working properly, and I've not taken enough ownership to have it fixed yet. So I'm working on that for you today, and in the meantime, I'm going to do what I can to help bring you current on what has occurred the last couple of days. The first thing that we did on Monday is we went through the author's preface to the original edition of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. There are many different versions of this now, edited versions, although they are all, of course, very carefully based in the original. Sorry for the tippy camera. I'm using a selfie stick so that I'm not totally tied up with my hands. So this book is one that is really the basis of most all organized thought around wealth consciousness today, and many seminar programs and books and classes have been developed from this work. And the Earl Nightingale Foundation is the official foundation for his works, and there's actually another book coming out by Napoleon Hill in October. The Master Key is a consolidated version of this, but we are going to be focusing on Think and Grow Rich formally. Though Brooks Brown and I have worked through this book over the course of the past several months, this time we want to go through it with more attention to action and really using it rather than just reading it. So I'm going to skip the introduction because if you're really interested in this, you'll read it yourself. And you'll read chapter 1 and chapter 2 on your own. Your chapters may or may not match up to mine depending on which version of the edit you have in front of you. So in chapter 1 for me, it begins with the power of thought. And the first story talks about the man who thought his way into partnership with Thomas A. Edison, who was Edwin C. Barnes. He was a man who, for whatever reason, developed a serious burning desire for one thing, and that was that he desired to be Thomas Edison's business partner. He wasn't interested in working for him. That wasn't the end goal. He wanted to be a partner. He wanted to be a peer. And that was his main desire. That was his total burning desire. And so he went through and made a series of choices because he didn't have any resources at the time. He didn't have money for bus fare, it was a train at the time, so rail fare to Orange, New Jersey, where Mr. Edison's business was and where he lived. And the other thing that blocked him is that he didn't know Mr. Edison. He didn't even have a connection to get him in the room, right, to get the meeting. So what he did is he just basically burned his bridges, as the saying goes, and he hopped on a freight train and rode on a freight train and just kind of hitched a ride and got to Orange, New Jersey, and presented himself at the laboratory and announced that he'd come to do business with the inventor, to go into business with him. And Mr. Edison, when speaking of the first meeting, said, "He stood there before me looking like an ordinary tramp, but there was something in the expression of his face which conveyed the impression that he was determined to get what he'd come after. I had learned from years of experience with men that when a man really desires a thing so deeply that he's willing to stake his entire future on a single turn of the wheel in order to get it, he's sure to win. I gave him the opportunity he asked for because I saw he'd made up his mind to stand by until he succeeded. Subsequent events proved that no mistake was made." Now, he didn't give him a big opportunity. He actually started him working as a janitor, basically cleaning up the area and picking up odd jobs, things that no one else wanted to do for the most part. But Barnes never stuck with that. He saw it as an opportunity, a way in, and he was willing to pay whatever price it took to get to that end result that he wanted, which is being a peer and working with Thomas Edison as a business partner. After a time, an opportunity presented itself because one of Mr. Edison's inventions The Edison dictating machine, which was later the Ediphone, was developed, and his salesmen that he already had on staff weren't very excited about it. It was too big of an idea, and they weren't ready to sell it. And so Barnes saw his opportunity, and he took it. He said, I can sell it, and he did. He went out and he sold it like crazy, and this machine started becoming a thing. And actually the saying became made by Edison and installed by Barnes. And once he had established that, he not only established for himself the financial support that he'd never had, because he finally had found something that would create that abundance, but he also became a partner, straight up, literally, to Thomas Edison, and he met his goal. So that is the initial story of Think and Grow Rich. The first story in the book says he had no money to begin with, he had but little education, and he had no influence. But he did have initiative, faith, and the will to win. With these intangible forces, he made himself #1 man with the greatest inventor who ever lived. The next story is 3 Feet from Gold. And this story is about R.U. Darby, who later became a very successful salesman. However, it started because he wanted to be a gold miner. He bought a mine, he went out and mined his mine, and he found a vein of gold. And he purchased some machinery, got some loans, purchased some machinery, and kept digging. And they emptied that vein. They didn't know enough about the process of mining to know where else to look, so they kept digging. And eventually they gave up. They sold the machinery to someone else. The person who bought it sought out expert advice and found out that they had actually stopped only about 3 feet from the next vein. And so he kept digging, found the fault line, and became rich from the very same mine that they had given up on. So R.U. Darby took that as a motivation. He used it as fuel. And the next time he saw his opportunity in life for gold, it was in insurance. He became a life insurance salesman. And he used that as fuel, as well as this next story. The next story is a 50-cent lesson in persistence. It talks about R.U. Darby's uncle, who's a sharecrop farmer. And at the time, there was still we were still in the waffling space between slavery and free. And so he had some sharecrop workers on his farm, and one of these was a mother and daughter, and he owed the mother 50 cents for some reason or another and had not been paying. So the mother sent her little girl to him to demand the money. And Darby was in the room at the time, and he knew his uncle was a very angry man and a large man. And so when the little girl came to him and said, "My mommy sent me to get this 50 cents, he told her to go away. And she stood there in defiance. Although she said, "Yes, sir," she was respectful, but she stood there and she didn't move. And when he noticed she was still there, she said it again. My mommy said sends her 50 cents. And he said, "Go on home, or I'll beat you," basically. And she said, "Yes, sir," and she didn't move. So after a couple more minutes, he went to grab the switch, which is a whip, basically, and to threaten her and to get her to get out of there. And he approached her in the anger that he usually did with his people. And this little girl, for whatever reason, maybe she was more afraid of her mother than she was of him, took a step towards him and stood there in her power and looked him in the eye and screamed in a very shrill voice. It says, "My mommy's got to have that 50 cents. And he was so shocked by the power that she was using and the determination that he pulled a 50-cent piece out of his pocket, a $50 out of his pocket, and gave it to her. And when she was walking away, she just stared him in the eye and backed up very slowly until she turned and ran out the door. And so this story was very powerful to Mr. Darby as well, because he used that as fuel. If this little girl can have that much staying power after the word no, what could he do? And so for him, anytime he was told no in his sales, he didn't stop. And he says, "The better portion of all sales I've made were after people had said no." Because in his mind he said, "I've got to make this sale. just like she said, my mama's got to have that 50 cents. So these stories are really awesome. This whole chapter, the first chapter, is all about the power of thought and how it is the real secret to success, learning to master our thoughts. It quotes W.C. Henley, "You are the master of your fate and the captain of your soul." So I'm going to move on to the next chapter, which is desire, which we covered this morning, and is really, beside the concept of managing our thoughts and being clear about managing that like we would a garden, weeding out things that are not productive and making sure to plant good things and water what we want to be thinking so that we can develop our minds, because thoughts are things. In fact, they are the only things, would be said by many people today who study this sort of work. Desire is the next step. Desire is the fire, desire is the fuel that gets us moving, that moves us towards something, that gives us something to move toward. And developing that burning desire is something that many say cannot be taught. I believe that it can be developed simply because it's written here, and I've seen it before. When we think about, one way I've heard it written before is, if you think about a vacation and you start planning for that vacation, your excitement builds as you're looking toward it. So we can set a desire and build that burn by just setting that desire and being clear and knowing that from our heart that that's what we really want. So what our homework tonight with Think and Grow Rich is this second chapter, and it's really the method, the 6 definite practical steps. 1 is to fix in your mind the exact amount of money you desire. It's not sufficient merely to say, I want plenty of money. Be definite as to the amount. There's a psychological reason for definiteness, which will be described in a subsequent chapter. Number 2, determine exactly what you intend to give in return for the money you desire. There's no such reality as something for nothing. We have to pay the price. There is always a price to be paid, so determine what you're willing to give. And be honest. Number 3, establish a definite date when you intend to possess the money that you desire. Create a definite plan for carrying out your desire and begin at once, whether you're ready or not, to put this plan into action. That's step 4. Number 5, write out a clear, concise statement of the amount of money you intend to acquire. Name the time limit for its acquisition. State what you intend to give in return for the money, and describe clearly the plan through which you intend to accumulate it. Number 6, read your written statement aloud twice daily, once just before retiring at night and once after rising in the morning. As you read, see and feel and believe yourself already in possession of the money. Tying our desires to emotion and repeating it to our mind, the way that this works is described later in this book. But what it does is it creates kind of an autopilot within us to where we allow the universal energies to conspire for our benefit. We provide the space where the universal energies can create for us paths that we may not be able to create in our own mind, because we're human. And frankly, our thoughts, unless we specifically focus on training them otherwise, are designed to be based on experience. That means that we'll always create from our past unless we are consciously creating a different future. So take this into thought. Please grab the book if you want to participate with us. Catch up with the reading. We're going to be reading chapter 2 in my book, which is faith. Chapter 3, which is faith, visualizing and believing the attainment of desire. But for now, the focus is, what is your desire? What is it that you want to create? And tie a monetary value to it and tie a time limit to it. And tomorrow morning, we are going to be sharing those. At least a few of us will be sharing those with you and moving on with the book. Thank you for being with me today. If for some reason my phone is not recording the call tomorrow yet, if I, for whatever reason, have not been able to create that, then I will record another of these for your review, because it's very important to me that everyone get to share in this process with us. So thanks so much. I hope you have an amazing day. Bye-bye.